Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Erudition session. Erudition is a red tea from Anhui Province. It's part of the Qihong family. So you frequently hear us refer to teas from the Qimen County area as either Qimen teas or Qihong. And literally speaking, Qihong is an abbreviation of Qimen. So Qimen, take the Qi, and then Hung Cha, which means black tea, actually red tea. And so it's Qihong, and it refers to the fact that lots of different subvarietals of red tea are made in Qimen County. Simple as that. This should suggest something else to you as well. What it should suggest, the fact that you already have a name that calls out the red teas, is that there are other teas that grow in this area. And in fact, and actually, I said that incorrectly. Not other teas that grow in this area, but other actually, in some cases, the same tea bush that is processed in different ways. Instead of being red, they leave it green. So let's do a little history here. Remembering that this area, which is in southern Anhui Province, that this area has been famous in China since the Tang Dynasty. So that means from 618 onwards, it was famous. What was it famous for? It was famous for green tea. And so time immemorial, it grew green tea. So at least from the 600s, and I'm sure earlier than that, all the way up to the 1800s, green tea, green tea, green tea. So what happened? And actually, instead of, let's back up a minute. How do we know it was so famous in the Tang Dynasty? Because famous poets included names of places where they were buying tea. And this, we don't have to check anything because the places exist, the names exist, and the tea at that time was all green tea. So they were buying green tea. And the descriptions in the poetry are descriptions of very robust towns, small towns in that area, good transportation. Well, you had these things because the tea business was booming. Tribute tea from this area was sent to the emperor. This means they weren't just growing Liptons. They were growing real tea, good tea, tea that you would send to the emperor. So it's been growing there for a long time. And you know why? Because it has the 4 mores and the 1 less. So they have the same in Qimen County. Yeah, we're really good. You know, we're at the 30-degree latitude. This is the ideal tea growing region because we have these 4 mores and 1 less. 4 mores and 1 less. The first time we heard this, we're thinking, 4 mores, what is that? So, more mountains. Oh, that's good. Yes, tea in the mountains is always good. More rain. Oh, the watershed. That's good too. More fall. That's great. And more clouds. And what's the less? Less direct sunlight. So, this is a saying that characterizes this area. This area is totally beautiful. You go to this area, the water really is very abundant throughout the whole area. They've really handled the development and protection of this area very well. So now let's do a little history, and then this will lead into why we call this a type of qihong, but it's a gongfu qihong. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's do history. Let's further do a little history. So really, red tea didn't start probably until sometime in the middle 1600s. And in Anhui, in Qimen County, there was really not much red tea being processed through 1850. So you went through the 1700s with very little red tea being processed. And it's ironic because one of the processes for doing green tea in Qimen County, particularly at the Buddhist temples, was something called suluo. And it was a process whereby they applied a little bit more heat, and they did have more of a toasty flavor. It didn't really get oxidized, so it's hard to call it anything except green tea. But as soon as you start roasting, then you're on your way to figuring out, oh, well, maybe we should oxidize this stuff too. And maybe that'll give us a really interesting and good flavor, which of course it does. So it wasn't until 18, so this is going to be a little choppy here. The reason it's going to be a little choppy is because the history isn't 100% verified. There are three theories. Theory number three, we're not even going to talk to you about because it's such a ridiculous theory. But at some point, it rose its head. But theories 1 and 2 both make a lot of sense. So let's start with Huiyuan Lu. That's the name of a farmer in, or a landholder slash farmer in Qimen County. And he planted in 1855 some 5,000 acres of tea. The tea market wasn't doing very well at that time. Remember, we're going to have an opium war, or we're in the midst of an opium war, and things are out of balance, out of whack in China in terms of the value of tea. And so, by the end of the 1860s, he has to stop, apparently, which goes somewhat as follows. What if we produce another style of tea here and it'll be new and fresh? And so he hired a master tea processor to work on a new style. So, okay, that's one theory. And that new style somehow showed up in market somewhere between 1872 and 1875. Realistically, I think 1875 is kind of a date you can drive your stake in the ground. Theory number 2 actually probably is closer to the truth, but there is some overlap with theory number 1. The name in theory number 2 is Yu Gangchun. And what's his gig? How does he become involved? Well, he used to be an official in Fujian Province. Oh, this is important because in Fujian Province, by the start of the 1700s, in fact, at the end of the 1600s, they already had a red tea process. They're producing, they're selling abroad in full swing. But they're doing it craft. They're not doing it, they don't have big farms. They're doing it in these little craft, and each farm is crafting a little bit differently. It's really interesting and unique. And even to this day, you have these small varietals in Fujian Province, highly crafted, very interesting red teas. So Yu Gangchun loses his job in 1871, goes back home. Where's home? Qimen County. And in Qimen County, he talks to everybody he can find who's growing tea and says, hey, look, let's do some red tea. And farmers in Qimen tend to be conservative. So everybody's nodding their head, but inside their head, they're saying, are you out of your gourd? We're not going to do red tea. We don't know how to do that. Nobody's doing that here. Finally, one farmer commits. He does. In the meantime, Yugan Chan has brought the technique. So actually, what did he bring from Fujian? He brought really high levels of knowledge of the refined technique of how to make interesting red teas. So what we can do with both of these theories, and probably what should be done, probably everybody was talking to one another. You and Yuan probably knew each other. I'm sorry, you and who probably knew each other. And therefore, and who was the one who had that 5,000 acre farm? So somehow between the two of them, the production of Qimen needle started. And we say Qimen needle because that's a convenient naming convention, and that's certainly what the Chinese use. But is it a realistic naming convention? What is a realistic naming convention? Does it capture the nuances? And the answer is it doesn't really capture the nuances because you have sub-varietals, so you do have different flavors. Process as taught and as brought from Fujian, basically the same in the processing arena, but the varietals were different. So that's one reason that you get so many teas from Qimen County that are red. They're produced in the Qihong or Qimen style, but they have different tastes. They have different tendencies. This is the reason why. Now we're going to get to the key point here. The key point is, what was it again that Yugan Chan brought from Fujian? He brought the Kung Fu processing style. Oh no, that word again, Kung Fu. I see that in Bruce Lee movies. I see that in the Wuyi Mountains. Oh yeah, we're doing Kung Fu tea today. What does that mean? It's used in all of these contents. Truly, it means mastery, high mastery. What does it imply? It implies a prolonged training, a prolonged set of techniques, whether it's Bruce Lee, whether it is Kung Fu tea in the Fujian Mountains, not the Fujian Mountains, in the Wuyi Mountains, or whether it is the production of Qihong tea. So in China, they actually say Qihong Kung Fu Cha. But that doesn't mean that they're brewing it. It means this is reference to the processing. Ah, so this must mean that the processing has steps and more than 4 steps. And that would be an accurate guess on your part. It's got 5 primary steps. I'll go through those 5 in a minute. And then it's got 10 refining steps. So this is a big deal. You don't just pick and wither, roll and oxidize, and then bake, which are the 5 primary steps. I mean, that would be too easy. That would be almost like green tea, almost. Knowing, of course, you don't oxidize green tea, so it's impossible. So what are these 10 additional steps? And rather than go through piece by piece, let me give you a flavor of the steps. Because once you get a flavor of these steps, then it's not going to matter all the tools that they use for these steps. So basically, steps 6 through 9 are all about sieving or sieving out, taking out stuff you don't want. So what sort of stuff is not wanted? Stuff that's not uniform stuff. Tea leaves that aren't uniform, either in the picking or in the processing, they got broken. that stuff is sieved out. Now, it's not easy to sieve this stuff out, and hence, this is part of this very complex process to get this uniformity. And remember, there are 10 grades of Qihun. You've got special grade. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't start at the right one. You've got gift grade. You've got special grade. You've got premium grade. Then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 by number grades underneath that. So 10 grades. Gift grade is what leaders of China give to leaders of other countries, or very rich people purchase to give as very nice gifts to other industrialists or people who are deserving very nice gifts. Each of those first 3 grades has all 15 of these steps going. And the objective at the end of the day is by step 15 to do what they call evening up. So I'm skipping around here a little bit, but this is going to make sense the way I've approached it. Once you understand what the end result is supposed to be, it's supposed to be very even. They want for every grade the leaves to match. The leaves and the buds to match. Length, color, distribution, they want that matched. So at the very last step, for every grade, there's a plot. It's bigger than a plot. And they've got all these pieces of equipment out there that they dump the tea in. And then there's a master, it's not a barrel, but there's a master container in the center. And so they dump the first set in, they have a rake, they rake the tea and make sure that for that grade, so if they're dealing with grade 10, they want it to look a certain way. And so they rake until it does look that certain way. If it's gift tea, because there's so relatively little of it, the tools that they're using, they're the same, but they're smaller because they're not producing tons of gift tea. They're only producing a little bit of gift tea because every single leaf is supposed to match. Yes.
What does the rake accomplish? Are they raking so that they can actually see what all of the tea looks like and kind of gently raking through to be able to assess? Or
2 things, one of which you just alluded to, which is they want to see that everything looks like it's integrated properly. And yes, they're not raking hard. They're not in your garden raking out the weeds. This would be called bad raking. And they aren't doing bad raking. They're doing soft raking. So what's the other main purpose? Because remember, I said there are all these containers outside the central area, and each is a separate batch. And so they want all the batches to be even.
so they might relocate something from one batch to another, or at least remove something
No.
from a
No,
batch if it looks wrong?
I catch what you're saying, and no. In plot number 15 or plot number 10, they have the central container, and then from, say, 50 farms, they have grade 10 tea from each of those 50 farms. And they have to make sure that all grade 10 tea is uniform. Yeah. So that's all, that's what they're really trying to do with that.
Okay.
So that's the end result. Before you get to that end result, what do you have to do? Remember, I said that there are 10 refining steps. So it's taking time every day to do this stuff. When it's taking time to do this stuff, what's going on with the tea leaves? Remember, they have the 4 mores, the 1 less. The 1 less being less direct sunlight, Lots of rain, lots of fall. So these leaves are picking up moisture. So step 14, before you even up the tea, you gotta refire it over a charcoal fire, very controlled to get the moisture out of the tea leaves. Then you go to that last step. So steps 12 and 13, so that's before firing, are two levels of actually hand picking out. And this would be for the top grades. So gift, special, premium, 1 and 2. These first 5 grades get 12 and 13, steps 12 and 13. And steps 12 and 13 is you have these tables where you have all these, mostly women, sitting around, and I kid you not, this sounds like I'm making up a story, but I am not. They are actually picking out what they would call the dross, the little yellow leaves that just don't belong in there. And remember, by the time they get to step 12, they've already been doing sieve work, and they've been doing sieve work since step 6. And so they get the gross stuff out. They figure out what's going to end up as gift tea. They figure out what's going to end up as grade 10 tea, and so on. So they're doing that all the way through up to step 9. In step 9, what they do is they have a fan device which divides the tea into larger and smaller leafed, larger leafed and smaller leafed. And then that refining continues to go through steps 10, 11, and 12 are different types of tools to either flip the tea, and as you flip it, have the dross float away. And it's really interesting because this process is not what one usually imagines for red tea. And certainly it's not what they're doing in Yunnan, that's for sure. But it is that same sort of crap that they're doing in Fujian. So small batch, and when it's small batch, it's easier to accomplish, and you can accomplish this at a farm. When it's stuff that they're doing at Qimen, they have these enormous factories, which have then these enormous rooms, which deal with all of these steps. Step number 8. I know I'm out of order. Don't worry about it. Step number 8 is an interesting step. And that's the reason I'm landing on that right now. And after they've sieved out in steps 6 and 7, there are some leaves that just aren't going to make it. They're something is wrong. And so those all get aggregated in step 8 and then put in a bag. And the bag is pounded on a stone. Why is this? They're trying to break it up into very fine tea. They're not going to throw this away. They're going to actually, heaven forbid, actually, this tea will find its way into a tea bag.
Wait, the part you call dross?
Well, the dross hung in there, so it got beyond step 8. Pre-dross, but ugly looking and broken up leaves, that did not get there. That, yes. All right, so this is why it's called Kung Fu tea, because there's all this mastery. And just in case you're confused, because if you think, oh, well, this is interesting, I ought to be able to do stuff like that. I've got plenty of sieves at home, and I can get tea sieve down and so forth. And I know how to throw tea in the air and have wind come along and take out, stuff that doesn't belong. I know we all, as Americans, have great faith in our abilities. And most of us are really smart, and certainly everybody on this broadcast is extremely smart and brilliant and can do almost anything they want. You see, I said almost. You would be hard pressed to go through this process. It takes the tea masters, who are masters of step, by the way. They're not tea masters of all 15 steps. They are masters by step 10 to 15 years before they achieve the mastery. Because it isn't as easy as just dumping in the sieve. Oh, let's just swing this thing back and forth. It doesn't work that way. You have to have judgment, speed, experience. So it's really interesting. It's interesting to watch the refining process. The refining process is the most difficult part. The first primary processes, if you take out picking and withering, because you really, well, you could actually do that machine via machinery. And in the largest factories, they do that via machinery. They're not doing picking though by machinery. You can wither by large scale industrial machines. You can certainly roll by machine. They have these rollers. The oxidation is basically keep out of the way. You know, you pile it, make sure you don't pile it too high or pile it too low, and you control temperature. And then the baking can be done in a larger oven. So from the primary process, a lot of those processes can use industrial functionality. But once you get to the refining processes, it's much harder to have an industrial process do that. So there's two outcomes of that because of that. One is when you are able to industrialize some steps, you can actually get in the large factories a total amount of tea through the factory that is much greater than you could at a farm. That's one thing. Secondly, at the larger factories, you can aggregate and pay to have big experts in each of these areas on staff. And that's what the larger processing places do. Whereas on the farm, it's got to be the farmer himself or the farmer's family that does it if they are going to actually do the whole process. And it's really hard and expensive for a farmer to do that. So many of them, the bulk of them, go to the larger factories and they have them produce. All right. Let's go ahead and have a demonstration of this tea. So Tea Master will demonstrate, and then you will brew with her. So it is my great pleasure to bring Bijou up to stage and have her demonstrate Erudition, one of the Qimen teas. Hey.
Yeah, we do. Good morning. We do Qihong Qihong cha. Okay. So that's from the the Anhui. This Qimen县in the Anhui Province. So yeah, they use the glass, same thing same size, but you follow me, okay? So we try the traditional the called Qihong cha. Okay, this is the two.
So you'll see that she uses 4 cups. You don't need to use 4 cups. You would use 2. And she does that to cool down the water more quickly. So the rules for this are 4 grams, 3 minutes, 170-degree water.
It's in Qimen County in China, This sometimes 7 glass and also, yeah, we use the 4, okay?
Making sure that everything is very, very clean. You can use any degree of water temperature between 170 and 212 in that first process to clean and heat the glasses. But when you actually steep the tea, it should be at 170 or lower. And as part of history of this tea, I remind you that Qihong is the base of English breakfast, and actually a number of other teas as well.
What grade of this tea are we experiencing today?
A special.
Please follow me, so also you can see it's change different, right? We need to do the best flavor.
See, she cools down the water. Our water comes out at 175. So we always go through this process of aerating the water, dissipating the steam, getting the glasses ready. Puts in the leaves. Make sure that leaves start to get heated. Remembering that, of course, you can smell dried tea, but it's not the same effect. And for people who are not in the tea industry, smelling the dried tea usually doesn't give you much of a clue. Whereas smelling the tea, once it starts to be heated, the tea leaves, once they're heated, now that makes the difference. Now she's putting the water back in the kettle, and that's because the kettle has a good pouring spell. You can control where the water's going, and so she pours on the side of the cup, almost this theory of trying to pour under the water, under the tea leaves.
This is called traditionally, the food, the qihong. So we can see. The country different, I use it, so. Three minutes.
Yes, okay. Good. So right away, you see that there's color change in the brewing tea here, and you're starting to get a little bit of gold, maybe a little hint of amber coming on. Most of the tea leaves float to the bottom. And so why isn't this entirely used in English breakfast? Why isn't English breakfast just a synonym for Qimen needle or Qihun? And that's because this is expensive tea. It goes through these processes, and the British early on realized, oh my gosh, we love this stuff, but my gosh, we better put the brakes on somehow. And how are we going to do that? Once they started growing tea in India and Sri Lanka, what they did, and the cost of growing tea in those two places was pennies on the dollar compared to this tea. So what they did for most of the blends was to put about 10% of Qihun in it, and then the other 90% was going to be either a blend of Assam or the Yuva, which is the Sri Lankan tea, and get it up to that 400%. Over time, what they did, and certainly for the king, for the royalty, what they did is they made blends where it was more like 80%, 80 or 90% of the Qihun, and then just a small percentage of the others. And at the very highest levels, of course, we do what we do here, which is this is just Qihun, and that's it. And because none of this is blended. So this gives you a little bit of historical background. This gives you the real background about why this is called Qihun Gungfu or Qimen Gungfu. And that's what it really refers to. You'll hear people sometimes carelessly refer to, oh yeah, this is Gungfu style, without realizing that it really implies a very detailed way of making the tea, very long and expensive process. Are there Gungfu styles in other places? There are, but this is one of the most famous. 3 minutes is expired. Tea master is separating the tea leaves. Tea itself. So right away, you'll notice the color. It's got real color to it. But unlike blended black teas, red teas, I'm sorry, it doesn't have that huge darkness of color. It's distinct, but it's not huge. So this is single source. All right, let's enter the quality arena. This is done at 170, so we can take a bigger introductory sip, and I will do that. And remember, what I'm looking for are levels of dryness in the mouth, where they occur, how it goes down the throat, and what sort of aftertaste there is, and then energetics. So let's try it. Here it is. No, you're not trying. I am trying. Okay, I get a feel right away for the mouth feel. Tell where it's dry for me. Oh, by the way, take good notes because this is a red tea series the next 3 weeks. Erudition today, insouciant next week, and autumn colors in 2 more weeks. And all different, all different. All right, I'm going to take a second exploratory sip. And on this one, I'm going to verify the initial feeling that I got. And then I'm also going to think about aroma. I'm going to think about what sort of taste I'm detecting. I'm always thinking about energetics, how I feel from drinking. Okay. It's your turn to brew. Yeah. So remember to set your timer for 3 minutes. Get your water down as close to 170 as you can. If you're gonna air, it's interesting. I always say err on the side of being a little cooler. Turns out, because of how this tea is processed, it can actually withstand in a pinch a little bit hotter.
Does a little bit hotter change the flavor of the tea?
Yes, a little bit, but not so much, not as dramatically as some of the other teas. So for example, when you get your Yunans that have floral or Fujians that have floral, and Crimson Needle comes to mind. If you brew that at 180, just 5 degrees more than its standard brewing, all of a sudden, you just don't get as much floral. All right, always making sure that you know where everything is on the tableau. Tableau is clean, easy to handle. You've heated the cups. You're drawing water. Dissipating the steam, aerating the water. You open bag number 1, labeled Erudition. And you add it to the heated cup. Shake the leaves because you're trying to get them heated, get a first sense of what this tea might bring to you. You can pour the water into a kettle and pour from the kettle with a spout. That's helpful, but you don't have to. Then you hit your timer for 3 minutes. So the largest factory in Qimen County makes about 30 tons of qihun during the season. That is a lot of tea. And what that tells you essentially is that almost that entire county is devoted to growing tea. And again, it's not entirely all red tea, although red tea is the big market coming out of that county. They do a little bit of green. They do a little tiny bit of some varietals that aren't part of the normal qihun varietal family. But almost all of that tea gets exported. Consumption of red tea in China, over the years, it's grown somewhat, but realistically, the big consumption is in Europe, Turkey, Russia, and one other place. Oh, that's right. One other place in the Middle East. I believe it is Iraq or Iran. Yes, I think you're right. It is Iran. So those are the places that are consuming this type of tea. And again, at this level, at the erudition level, you don't have, not, that stuff isn't really going to Russia. That stuff really isn't going to countries where they can't afford this, because this is really high grade stuff. And it's the high grade stuff which mostly stays at home, because the aficionados, the tea lovers in China who drink red tea, they want their supply of really good red tea. And remembering that the great places that produce, and by the way, this is one of the 10 top teas on the official list in China. It's won all sorts of awards. In the 1915 Pan Pacific Exposition, they won a gold medal. In China in 1980, it was touted as extraordinary tea. In 1983 in China, won some big awards. So over and over again, this tea in China has been recognized. Oh, this is really good. This is the type of tea that you give as a gift. All right, timer is finished. Separate the tea leaves from the tea. And remembering that this is done at a lower temperature, you're going to be able to take a larger sip when you're making your judgments. So go ahead and do that. Enter the quality arena, and let's see what you come away with. Remember to take good notes too, because this has some things going with it. So while you're thinking about this, as famous as this tea is, it's almost, I don't remember ever being served an official banquet, this type of tea in China. Usually it's going to be a green or an oolong. I don't remember. That doesn't mean that I haven't. I just don't remember. Yes.
First comment is from Rob. The evolution of the scent is amazing. The warm leaves have a malty scent, but the steep leaves have a malty and floral scent. And then the tea liquor has a cinnamon hot cider scent. This is amazing.
So great comment, Rob. Rob evaluated the aroma of the dry leaves, of the
Warm leaves,
once
steep
they re-
leaves.
steep leaves,
And
and
then
then the tea liquor. And it started out with malty, that's the dry leaves. It moved to malty and floral, the wet leaves. And then when it got in the cup, the real magic occurred. Gosh, he watched us dump the cider. You guys know? Oh, no. Yes, cider flavor, cinnamon, warm, amazing is Rob's comment. And I like this comment because what it tells you is tea at this level, red tea at this level, it deserves to take the time to evaluate, because there's a lot going on with it. Yes.
Comments from Jeannie. Warm leaves have strong aroma of sweetness, honey, and stone fruit.
Warm leaves, aroma of sweetness, honey, and stone fruit. Great comment, Jeannie. And they do. And again, at this level, they better, because strike that last comment. Uncalled for. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Next round of comments is not.
Oh, okay.
Wait, Peter. This is from Peter. Hints of honeysuckle. Honey or honeysuckle. Really nice umami viscous texture.
Oh, I like this. hints of honeysuckle, and then Peter addresses texture, umami, and what was the other?
Viscous.
Viscous texture. And as red teas go, this was a great catch, that viscous, because we have some red teas. So the first one that comes to mind is omnipresent. Omnipresent, you drink that thing and that's juicy, and you would never think of that as viscous. This you do because it kind of sticks in your mouth. And so great catch on that.
Do teas, Cindy asks, do teas ever have legs?
Do teas have legs? Not sure how I'm going to answer this question. The teas I drink normally don't have legs. I'm sure there must be a second part to this question.
Rob says, I'm not gonna let this one run away.
Very good, very good.
Cindy says for clarification, as in wine, if it needs
Oh, I
clarification,
see.
viscous.
I see. Okay. I was in a different space when you asked that question. Yes, a very good question. So when you make that type of comparison in wine, I get that. Nonetheless, the Chinese wouldn't use that term, and that's why I was thrown for a second. They would use more of a term of staying power rather than and it all means about the same thing. And it's a staying power in your mouth. It's a staying power on your palate in terms of remembering the flavors because they've etched themselves in. So from that standpoint, yes, but they talk about it using different analogies. Yeah. So for those of you who are Cliff tea lovers, when you think about red tea in comparison, one of the things that's strikingly different is how accessible this immediately is. Whereas the Cliff teas take quite a bit of effort many times to get deep into them. And they also seem to change throughout the experience. The red teas tend to stay a little bit more consistent as you experience them. So these are things to just note as you're thinking about these teas. All right. No other comments, then I'm going to move forward. So next week, we get a strikingly different red tea from Qimen Province called Erudition. So that's what I'm looking forward to tasting with you next week. We've come to the end of today's session. Great commentary. Look very much forward to continuing this red tea expedition next week. Your responsibility this week, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
Here, I'm